Okay, let's get started. Webinar is live. Okay. Welcome everyone, folks listening in. I see that number increasing. Welcome in. Everyone, welcome tonight to the Independent District Commission's public hearing on the draft criteria. Today is Wednesday, March 22nd, 2023. We'll be here from 6 to 8 p.m. My name is Sophia, and I'm serving as a project manager for the Independent District Commission, and today I'll be your Zoom moderator. Super excited to have everyone here today, and with that, I'll pass it off to my colleague to go over some Zoom logistics before we get started.
Thanks, Sophia. I'm just going to share screens really quick here for folks so you can see our Zoom overview. And can everybody see that okay? Awesome. Well, so hey, everybody. It's good to see you tonight. And I'm just going to cover the Zoom logistics really quick for everybody. This hearing is being recorded for later viewing, and a copy of the recording is going to be posted on the Independent District Commission website under past meeting and events. For today's hearing, we have closed captioning, ASL, and Spanish interpretation available. To access the Spanish interpretation, just please click on the globe icon at the bottom right of your screen and select Spanish. To access closed captioning, click on the CC button at the bottom right side of your screen. And commissioners, please set your chat settings to everyone so folks listening today can follow along. Community members, we have the Zoom Q&A feature available. Feel free to submit questions or comments through there. During today's hearing, we won't be able to respond to them in real time, but it will become part of the hearing recording. And as a reminder, you can always submit public comments through our comment form online or website, or by emailing districtcommission@portland.gov. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to the commissioners.
Great. Thank you, Adam. Could we have the next slide, please? Awesome. Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Awesome. So hello, everyone. Welcome to the Independent District Commission public hearing on district plan criteria. So my name is Nisha Saxena. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm serving as co-chair along with my fellow co-chair, Commissioner Sharon Van Sickle Robbins. So I sincerely appreciate all of you being here this evening and taking time out of your schedules on behalf of the Independent District Commission. So we want to take a moment to thank you all for taking time out of your day to embark on this critical process of implementing city charter amendments. Got my notes here. Next slide, please. Great. So before we get started, I'm going to take a minute to go over our agenda for this evening. So we're going to start by going over an educational presentation of the Independent District Commission scope and authority, and then we will spend the rest of the evening taking verbal public comment. So again, thank you for being here to help inform our work. So I'll give it a second for folks to take in this slide before we move on to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Awesome, thank you. So to just go over what we're doing today, or what we're doing as a commission really quickly. So currently all of Portland's elected officials can live anywhere in the city, and they're elected by voters across the entire city. So under our new system, 4 geographic districts will be created with 3 city councilors elected to represent each of the 4 new districts. So the Independent District Commission was created by voter-approved amendments to the city charter, and this commission is tasked with preparing and adopting the district plan for city council elections, starting with the election of November 2024. So next slide, please. Great. So this is us today, the Independent District Commission, and we consist of 13 members, 3 alternate members, and 3 reserve alternate members. And this is all of us. These are our photos here. All of us were selected and appointed by the mayor and confirmed by City Council in January of 2023. The Independent District Commission was appointed to serve through the end of September. And as the name suggests, the Independent District Commission is a fully independent community body authorized to create the district plan for the city of Portland. And the commission must adopt the district plan by no later than September 1 of 2023. And we have a unique authority. So if 9 out of the 13 voting commissioners approve the plan, then it's adopted and final. So we have the authority to adopt and finalize a district plan for geographic boundaries. However, if after 2 votes of this commission, if we can't reach the 9-vote supermajority, then the most recent version of the plan will be referred to City Council for its consideration and adoption. So next slide, please. So as the Independent District Commission prepares the district plan, we're required to use voter-approved district criteria. And these are the voter-approved criteria. Any additional criteria we set forth, as long as it's, and any additional criteria that we set forth, as long as it's consistent with state and federal law. The Independent District Commission is also required to hold 9 public hearings. And there's a requirement of 1 public hearing early in the process before we develop the district plan. And that early public hearing is on whether any additional plan criteria should be considered. So that's the hearing we're having today. So this is our first public hearing. It's early in the process, and it's regarding criteria for the plan. We're also required to hold 8 more public hearings, and those 8 public hearings will consist of 2 hearings in each of the proposed districts. And those hearings will happen before we vote to adopt a district plan. So the draft district plan must be available to the community 1 month before the first of those additional public hearings. And we can't vote on a plan until 1 month after the last public hearing. Thank you. Let's get into my notes here. Okay. So the commission wants to ensure that the districting process is transparent, community-driven, and community members know what to expect. We've been discussing district criteria and working with mapping and technical consultants to gather different data sets. So today, the commission is seeking community input on whether the commission should consider additional draft plan criteria in addition to what's already mandated in the charter. Once the public comment period on district criteria is over, the commission will reconvene to deliberate on the input we receive, and we will vote on whether to add additional plan criteria. Once the district plan criteria is final, the commission will begin an iterative map-making process with our demographers, and ultimately we will vote on a proposed plan or plans for community input, and then we'll hold the 8 public hearings that I was talking about in July. So after the community input process is done, the commission will reconvene to deliberate on the input received and take a final vote on the district plan. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's our timeline. And this is our timeline for following the commission process. Public input on additional district plan criteria will run starting today through April 3rd at it says 8, I have 8 a.m. I'm not sure if that's 8 p.m. I'm going 8 p.m., 8 a.m. Okay. On April 5th, the commission will vote on district plan criteria. And then throughout April and May, the commission will continue the iterative map-making process with technical consultants. On May 31st, we will vote on a draft district plan or plans to be shared with the community for input. And then on June 1st, the draft district plan or plans will be released for community input, and the official comment period for proposed district plan or plans will open. And then in July, once again, the commission will host 8 public hearings and 2 2 of those hearings will take place in each of the proposed districts. We will also host weekday and weekend hearings. So those hearings will take place during the week and also potentially on weekends. And then in August, the commission will reconvene to deliberate on input received and vote on a final district plan. The earliest the commission will vote is on the final district plan is August 16th, and the last potential date is August 21st. And the deadline for district plan approval is September 1st. The work of this commission and our terms as commissioners will end at the end of September. Okay, so that was a lot to absorb. So, and we'll have time for questions. And then obviously most of this hearing today will be for public comment. So now that you've learned a little about the district commission's work, process, and timeline, I'm going to turn things over to co-chair Bensickel Robbins, and she will go into more detail around district plan criteria. And thank you all. I really appreciate your engagement again in this really important process. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Co-Chair Saxonen. So I'm Sharon Bensickel Robbins. I'm obviously one of the co-chairs, and we are creating initial districts and redistricting. It has to happen once a decade, and they're processes that are controlled by 2 federal laws, the Equal Protection Clause and the Voting Rights Act. Under the Equal Protection Clause, the creation of initial districts and the periodic updating of districts must be substantially, that's in quotes, equal in population. And this requirement is known as one person, one vote. Because district populations shift over time, district boundaries must be redrawn to ensure that each person's vote is equally weighted. The primary tool used in the districting and redistricting process is the federal census. Article 1, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution mandates a census every 10 years to count every resident in the United States. And the census includes basic demographic data, including total population by age, race, housing, and housing occupancy. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 requires districts that don't discriminate on the basis of race, color, or membership in a protected language minority group. And Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act prohibits districting plans that are intended to be racially discriminatory or that are shown to have a racially discriminatory result. Next slide. Thanks. The commission is required to create the district plan using the voter-approved district criteria and any additional criteria the commission sets consistent with state and federal law. And the voter-approved district criteria requires that the district commission ensure that each district is, as nearly as practical, number 1, contiguous and compact, meaning that a district would have one connected piece without any unconnected pieces. Number 2, utilize existing geographic or political boundaries, meaning natural and man-made boundaries such as highways, mountains, and rivers, which already often divide communities and make innate borders, or political boundaries like school board districts or state legislative districts or county districts. Number 3 is not divide communities of common interest. And communities of common interest are recognized by academics and jurisdictions throughout the country as groups that share a common policy concern and would benefit from being districted together. Dividing a community of common interest often leads to a decreased ability to advocate for that particular community's needs. Next slide, please. In districting processes, data is used to define the criteria. There are a number of data sets that are utilized in the process of creating districts. On the screen, you can see examples of data sets that can help define the district criteria. It's important to note that in the process of creating districts, there are some criteria that require specific data sets, while others are open for community and commissioner input. For example, population and any Voting Rights Act related issues must use the data released in the 2020 decennial census and the most recent American Community Survey. But for example, communities of common interest, that's open for community input, and the commission would like to know how you define your community. Some data sets can be used to help define multiple criterias. For example, places of interest like libraries could fall under geographic or political boundary because libraries are places that can be mapped. Or it could fall under communities of common interest, where it could be a group of people who use the library or who don't have access to a library. Where it says connected by transportation links, that means highways, roads, streets, or bridges. And is of equal population means that districts are drawn primarily to equalize population. The district commission must also ensure that no district will be drawn for the purpose of favoring any political party, incumbent elected official, or other person, and diluting the voting strength of any language or ethnic minority group. The criteria that is prescribed in the charter are similar to what has been upheld in federal courts regarding the formation of political districts. And the commission today is very interested in hearing your thoughts on whether any additional plan criteria should be considered before the commission begins to develop the district plan. Next slide, please. The district commission is working, as co-chair Saxon has said, with technical consultants and demographers to gather different data sets to help inform the district criteria. On the screen, you can see the various types of data sets that help inform criteria, and the commission will continue to identify and gather different data sets. Next slide, please. As the commission has been reviewing the district plan criteria and identifying and gathering data sets that help define the mandated criteria, they've also been deliberating whether additional district plan criteria should be added to the existing mandated criteria. The commission today would like to hear your thoughts on whether additional district plan criteria should be considered before the commission begins to develop the district plan. The commission has also been deliberating whether they should be more explicit with some of the existing criteria. One additional question that we have voted to pose to the community at this public hearings tonight is, should the commission be more explicit about the equitable distribution of public goods and services within the established criteria? Examples of public goods and services can be community goods and services that use public funding, things like libraries, community-based organizations, and others. Providing services, housing options, schools or early childhood centers, parks, and many more. We understand that some of these things presented today may be technical to some, and we hope our presentation gave you an overview of our work. Today, we simply want to understand what is important for you and your communities as we begin to develop district plans. And with that, this concludes our presentation, and I'll now pass it off to our moderator to help us get started with public testimony.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Van Sickle. Okay, so we'll get started with the public testimony section of our agenda. So I'm just going to take a quick moments just to run how public comment will start. So folks were asked to sign up in advance on the District Commission's website. So we're going to start with the folks that signed up first, and then we'll open it up to anyone else. If you signed up to testify, we ask that you make sure that your Zoom name is the same name that you used, that you're logged in with your Zoom here today. If you're using a different name on your Zoom account, you can always rename yourself in your Zoom controls. If today you'd like to testify and you did not sign up ahead of time, please let us know by raising your Zoom virtual hand, and we'll note that. So just raise your Zoom hand and we'll start writing those names down. You can also, if you can't find the Zoom hand, we have the Zoom Q&A feature open, so you can let us know through there. For everyone that's testifying today, you'll have 3 minutes to share your thoughts. When you give testimony, we ask that you please state your name, your zip code or neighborhood that you live in if you'd like, and 3, if you're testifying on behalf of a community-based organization or other organizations. And then let me just double check that nobody's joining on a phone. No, I think we're good. Okay, so we are going to get started. So my colleague Adam is going to start bringing folks in to the Zoom room. When you come in, you'll get a notification to be brought into the room. Please accept that to come in. And then we'll put the order of the testimony in the chat in a second. So our first testifier today is Winnie. I see you there. Welcome. You may begin testifying, and I'll start your timer as soon as you start. Winnie, you have to unmute.
Hi, my name is Wynn.
Wynn, sorry, apologies.
Rhymes with Lynn. My name is Wynn Firth. I live east of the river. I'm one of the many Portlanders who arrived in the last 5 years. I want you to know I have no regrets about the decision to come here. I was so bewildered by Portland's government when I arrived. And I am so therefore looking forward to our new government and participating in our new civic life. I think the design is thoughtful and brilliant and workable, and I thank you for the work that you're doing to bring it to life. I hope you enjoy the process. Whatever you do is bound to be so much better than what we have. You asked for public comments on criteria, and I have some, but first, what's most important to me is that at least 9 of you get together and approve a map. There is nothing you can do to generate public confidence for the many who are alienated from our city than to deliver on that. But to get to what you asked about, I support flexibility in terms of criteria because you don't know yet what the data, the trial maps, the public comment will teach you. And I'm in favor, as I think you are, of tons of data. Renters and homeowners, people most at risk from heat islands, communities most exposed to black carbon, traffic fatalities due to street design, whatever you in the public think might help. As Commissioner, I think it's Manjarrez said, it makes the invisible visible. You asked at your last meeting if you should be more explicit about the equitable distribution of public goods and services in your criteria. And I've struggled to figure out how that would work and what it would mean. I mean, as just explained, the basic criteria fall into 2 categories, desirable characteristics of the district and forbidden motives. And they were just described very well by the co-chair. All of us who follow the Charter Commission know that fixing our inequities in the delivery of public goods and services is a major driving force. But I'm not sure what it means to say that we should put this in this criteria. Are you proposing that the 4 districts have equal distribution of public goods and services as compared to each other? That doesn't seem like a useful exercise. Would consume time you don't have, so I don't think it's what you mean. Are you proposing that districts be judged by their ability to elect officials who will promote the equitable provision of public goods and services? If you are, and assuming that you're comfortable with that very speculative process, I'd be opposed because there are other goals like increasing civic engagement that I think matter to you and to me and to the people who ask for these changes. I support the view that we're better off with a strong understanding that people and communities who get inferior public services or more dangerous air, and you can add more, are communities of interest, and you will do your work in a way that does not dilute their power.
Thank
Just
you.
as you would
Your
not
time's
dilute the
up.
power of
Apologies.
others. Thanks.
Thank you. Up next, we have Richard.
Hello, I'm Richard Gonistysky. I'm also a new Portlander. I've only been here 18 months. I live in the Northwest District, and I'm the treasurer of the Northwest District Association, Neighborhood Association, but any comments that I make or suggestions that I make are not necessarily reflective of that neighborhood organization. So I'm not making it in their behalf. I'm simply making it as a private citizen. Two questions I had that I thought would be important criteria, not necessarily for the districting, but for how the commissioners are elected within the districts, is that I want to be absolutely certain that any commissioner who is elected in the future actually lives in the district in which they are elected. I know they have to be voted on by only the members of that district, but they should be required to live in that district, have their tax home there. Because I think one of the issues that I've seen in Portland is a lack of accountability of government. And I think if the government officials have to live within their district, they're going to be more accountable to the members of that district than if they live outside of it and only have to go there occasionally to work. I also think that they should have offices. All of the commissioners should have offices within the district. And I think personally, I think the city would run better if each of the 4 districts, since they're having 3 commissioners each, that the commissioners themselves decide to split up the district into 3 parts that each one of them is absolutely responsible for. Because right now it's difficult for citizens to know who is, if the garbage isn't collected on my street, who do I go to? And if you can go to your own local district commissioner and say, this is what's happening, that would be a big advantage over the system that we have currently. I do think Portland is a beautiful area to live in. I think the Northwest is a fantastic neighborhood. And I really admire the fact the city has gone through this experimental process of redesigning their city government to be more responsive to the needs of the people. And I think that's a great thing. I'm very happy that that's taking place, and I applaud you for your efforts to try to collect as much information as possible in doing this. So that's really all I had to say.
Thank you, Richard. Up next, we have, and I think I'm going to say this wrong, apologies, Llewellyn, and we're trying to bring you in the Zoom room, so accept that. So for now, we'll start with Jenny. So Llewellyn, we'll come back to you.
All right, good evening, members of the commission. Thank you for the opportunity to testify tonight regarding the districting criteria. For the record, my name is Jenny Lee, and I'm here on behalf of the Coalition of Communities of Color. We're an alliance of culturally specific community-based organizations dedicated to cross-cultural collective action for racial justice. And we've engaged closely throughout the Charter Review Commission process and continue to work towards successful implementation. For tonight's topic of districting criteria, we encourage you to retain the criteria set forth in the charter and to continue your discussions about what information you will need to identify communities of interest without adding formal additional criteria. We all have so much to learn about Portland's many communities, and we believe that this Districting Commission's public engagement process will be the most impactful way to identify what features we should take into consideration as we identify communities of interest. As our organization began considering what it means to be a community of interest in the context of Portland, we realized that there is so much complexity across the city's geographies, demographics, institutions, histories, and ways of experiencing the city, that capturing the complexity and making meaning of it would be best done through the existing criteria so that we have maximum flexibility. And finally, as a matter of process and to achieve our goals of representation, we would like to see as many possibilities for maps as possible so that Portlanders can shape the ultimate lines through public engagement. So we hope that we believe the existing criteria will be what will give us the most opportunities and options for generating maps and the widest possible number of communities of interest being kept together within districts. And we also encourage you to listen to community members about what data and information matter to them as they build an understanding of their own communities and help to facilitate access to this data so you can serve as active participants throughout this process. And finally, I would like to encourage you to formally note for the record and an intent that distribution of goods and services is an important consideration for understanding a community of interest. As an organization representing communities of color, we believe that this is essential to be a part of that process, identifying it, but that keeping it under that larger criteria of community of interest would be the most effective way to build out maps that give us options and really represent how we experience our communities. So thank you so much for your service. We hope that we can be of use in this process as well and draw upon our relationships with community-based organizations. And we look forward to seeing where we'll all end up in representation for our city.
Thank you, Jenny. Up next, we have Llewellyn. I see you here.
Good evening. I'm sorry you all didn't get the message. I inadvertently clicked on the wrong thing when I was just trying to find the Zoom link. I have no comments.
Oh, no worries. That was quick. Okay, so up next we have Madeline.
Thank you. I'm Madeline Elder. My pronouns are she and her. And I've lived in Portland since 1986, mainly in North Portland, and I'm speaking for myself. I urge your use of the district criteria that's outlined in Measure 26-228 and move on to what will be the challenging but also fun, balancing the criteria to develop district maps. Please get past this criteria issue and promptly start your next step. No perfect map is possible, but a great map is possible to move Portland into a future with more representation and a more representative city council. Regarding the question about equitable goods and services, that is an important element of legislating by the new city council that is best achieved by your careful consideration of how not to break up communities of interest. Regarding comments to adhere to neighborhood boundaries, please keep in mind that the creation of many of Portland's neighborhoods was due to development patterns determined by wealthy landowners. A concern for equity, therefore, is undermined by rigid consideration of neighborhoods. It also seems likely that the new community-based alliances will develop due to creation of the 4 council districts and elections that facilitate representation. To be clear, I mean that neighborhood boundaries merit some consideration. Just balance them as you can do using the district criteria in the charter. I also just want to say thanks for your work. I know this is a lengthy process and it'll take up a lot of your time, but if you move beyond this criteria discussion and get to work with Portlanders on reviewing maps, that would be great. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. Up next, we have Gordon. Gordon, the floor is yours. You just have to unmute.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes, there we go.
Okay, excuse me. Portland previously had a commission similar to what you propose. It was changed to what you want to get away from because of the corruption. So I hope that you be very aware of the corruption possibility and make sure that it does not occur again. I also hope that you just take the population of the Portland area, divided into 4 equal squares by population, and do not gerrymander so that we have a commission boundary map that looks like what they used to do in Georgia to get federal congressional representative districts. And I think that would be the most fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Up next, we have Bob.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. My name's Bob Weinstein. I live in Northwest Portland. I'm representing myself. First of all, thank you all for your service and for what you're doing to come up with some sound, constitutionally protected and maps. And having said that, I'd suggest that you focus on the one criteria that is constitutionally required. And that's the one that's already been mentioned, the one person, one vote requirement mandated by the 14th Amendment, Equal Protection Clause. As you probably know, there's been a series of Supreme Court rulings, starting with congressional districts and later applying the same principles to state election districts and culminating in Avery v. Midland County local government districts. And in that case, the Supreme Court of the United States said the Constitution permits no substantial variation from equal population in drawing districts for units of local government having general government powers. That's the one requirement that's mandated by the United States Constitution. Second, I would urge no more criteria be added. First of all, I think those in the charter should be adequate. The more criteria you add, the more likely it is that you might stray from the constitutional requirements I mentioned of one person, one vote, and the greater the chances that the adopted plan might be litigated. As an aside, looking at the language of the charter itself, the criteria, as you know, are set forth in the charter. There does not seem to be either explicit or an implicit authority for the commission to add any more criteria. In closing, I think that you'll find that developing maps that meet the requirements, especially those of the Constitution of the United States, 14th Amendment, is not rocket science, and that along with your demographers and specialists, you'll find out that you only have so many options that meet legal requirements, and that you will ultimately come up with district maps that seem very reasonable to most people in Portland. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, for that information and for all of the people who've testified so far and who are going to continue to be testifying. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so up next we have Robin.
My name is Robin Tokmakian. I live in the Northwest area, and I have two comments to make with respect to criteria. So I understand that you seek to know if the public believes the equity of resources should be a criteria. It is very important that for all of us in the city to understand how city resources are spread around the city and how different parts of the city may or may not have access to similar resources, be they parks, supermarkets, street trees, or libraries, just as examples. I believe that this data may be useful to help to determine districts, but I don't think it needs to be a criteria. I say this for a couple of reasons. One is that the districts will be quite large, and they'll result in the districts at that large, very broad size having equal resources, even though when you look further down, they're not equal. Furthermore, having it as a hard and fast criteria and not just using the data may have some unforeseen and negative consequences. My other comment relates to the use of neighborhood associations or the official coalitions of neighborhoods to define a district as a criteria. Part of the reason for these groups that when they were created was because of our form of government in Portland and the difficulty residents had to communicate their needs to the city council and its bureaus. With our new form of government, residents of each district will have 3 people to speak to about their needs. And especially since these people won't be administering any bureau and won't have that time taken away from them. And thus, while neighborhood association boundaries may be a good starting point, they should not be a criteria. And thank you for listening and for your service in this very important task to reform our government.
Thank you, Robin. So up next, we have Chris C. We don't see you out in the attendee world, but if you are here under a different name, just let us know. So with that, we'll go to Melanie and then Ryan.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to complete my testimony from the last time we met. I want to share with you today the reasons that I pressed when I was on the Charter Commission sorry, I forgot to say Melanie Billings-Yen, that I pressed when I was on the Charter Commission to get compactness as one of the criteria, the only one that's not part of the state criteria. And especially to connect it to the issue of possibly adding equitable distribution of goods and services. On the Charter Commission and during the campaign, I gave over 150 presentations to communities around the city. And I was especially interested in working with people on the east side, the far east side. And what I continually heard from them was that they felt they did not have a voice in the city, that they did not matter. And now that I look at the maps and I look at things like voter turnout, it is no surprise that there we're looking at very low voter turnout. When I told them about the districting and how for the first time this was going to give them a voice, what I got back was suspicion, which isn't a surprise when you have a history of being ignored. I replied that I said that this would give you an equal voice to the wealthiest people in the city. You will finally have a chance to be heard. They wanted to see the maps. I told them that they couldn't see the maps because you guys would be drawing those maps. And the response I got was, then how do we know you won't find a way to draw the maps in some squiggly way that will combine us with a rich area, that will continue to run things and drown us out? That's why I and the whole commission added compact to the list. The single requirement, as I said, that's not part of the state requirement. It was a promise. It was a promise to those people that we had heard them. And it was proof in our sincerity that we wanted to equally and equitably represent all Portlanders. So that's why I oppose adding equitable distribution of public goods and services as a criterion. I completely applaud the goal, but the effect would be to dampen the voice of the underserved by lumping them in with the more fortunate and more politically active neighbors. It would also give a false picture of equity in all districts, which simply doesn't exist. And because the poorest have the historically lowest voter turnout, the people that they are elected would be more maybe inclined to ignore them in paying attention to the wealthier and more politically active people. So I just ask you to bear that in mind. I know you have the best intentions. I believe in you, and I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Melanie. Up next, we have Ryan. And folks, if you're just joining our public hearing and would like to testify, you can still sign up by just letting us know by raising your Zoom virtual hand or letting us know in the Q&A. So Ryan, floor is yours.
Sophia, I see a commissioner has her hand raised. I just wanted to pause before I.
Commissioner Van Ness. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I saw what you said. I'm happy to wait until we have the final individuals testifying to ask some follow-up questions if that's allowed.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead, Ryan.
Great. Thanks, Sophia. Good evening, everybody. My name is Ryan Nielsen. I'm a staff and member of Labor's Local 737. We're a union that represents about 3,000 workers who primarily work in the construction industry as laborers. So I'm here tonight on behalf of all of us. And I just, I wanted to comment on the concept of a community of interest that it seems like a lot of folks are talking about here tonight. So just in terms of framing, our union primarily represents blue collar workers. Our union hall is located in Outer East Portland. At our most recent membership meeting, we had a member that was speaking really it was quite sad. He was saying how ashamed he was to drive out to our union hall because of how poorly the roads are maintained in that part of Portland. And we've had members over the years who have talked, for quite some time about just the historic lack of infrastructure and underinvestment in Outer East Portland. The question I wanted to kind of pose to you all tonight is, in the city where we're kind of lacking critical infrastructure in key areas, yet we have so many folks who are prepared and able to work, who are the best in their trades. Why do we keep having this problem? And I just think the answer is that we have not centered working class people in the governance structure of our city. And I think the comments here and the discussion here tonight is really great. And I just wanted to, echo, what I heard from Jenny earlier, that when we're talking about what a community of interest is, I think that should kind of capture a lot of these important questions around public goods and services. Obviously, I came here tonight to speak on the underinvestment, the lack of infrastructure in outer East Portland. And however you all end up considering that, I just ask that you consider it and weigh it very, very heavily in how you are, proposing to draw up these districts. So thank you all so much for the time tonight to comment, and thank you all for your service on this commission. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ryan. So that is it for the folks who've signed up to testify. So this is kind of not a last call, but another ask. If you would like to testify, let us know. But with that, I will give it some time. And Commissioner Van Ness, I think you had a question while we wait, folks.
Yes, and I don't know if there's a way for any of the folks who testified to respond, or if we can just open up a dialogue with the commissioners, but forgive me, this concept of goods and services is something that is not in my professional wheelhouse, and I've spent some time trying to digest and understand. And here's where I'm finding a disconnect. What I'm sensing is that the request is to look at the issue of goods and services in the context of equity, and making sure that perhaps underserved communities, that is something that is factored in terms of are we ensuring that maybe underserved communities and goods of services are not disconnected as a result. But I'm just thinking like about Portland and how I'm visualizing it. And to me, it seems like the wealthier the areas, there aren't a lot of businesses in those areas, because they don't want the big boxes and the chains and so I just visualizing Portland, I'm not connecting goods and services and equity or inequity. And I'm truly hoping someone can just educate me about this so that I can understand it better.
Just a little check. We have no one else who signed up to testify, so I think you all can deliberate and kind of reflect on the testimony, and then if we do have someone who signs up, we can let you know.
Hi, it's Sharon. Commissioner Manjarrez, would you be available to share what your perspective was when you encouraged us to consider that question?
Yes, absolutely. And I appreciate all of the comments today. I feel like it's such a gift to get everybody's perspective on a shared question. It's such an exciting piece of it. And my feeling generally is you got to trust the people, put the question out there and see, what happens. And I thought it was incredible to hear just the thought that everybody put into one, what the question actually means and how it connects to their own experience. So I just want to say to Commissioner Van Ness, who I believe was the one who spoke right before, I appreciate you sharing your experience with that, because when I put the question out there, it was for my own clarity. And part of it was that when we think of things like places of interest, those are embedded they could be embedded in areas of geographic boundaries of their things. It could also be, communities of interest, but it sort of lives in a middle space. So I was curious last time as I was thinking about it, whether there was a need for it to be more explicit. And what I did hear today was a little bit of confusion about the question. And I think part of it is, I do want to be clear, and I wanted to be as clear as possible in the framing of the question. We're not talking about necessarily equitable access, which is a policy question and a policy goal. And that's, something that I think commissioners in the future will absolutely need to grapple with. I think there are many different historically underserved communities across our city. I wanted to think, and you actually hit the nail on the head in how you framed it. I wanted to bring a more asset-based lens to it, right? And my understanding and my experience in moving to Portland and becoming more familiar with different communities, particularly culturally specific communities and different folks, I have seen the incredible assets that they've brought to their neighborhoods, the incredible public goods. The Cully neighborhood is a great example, right? We have Cully Park. Cully Park is a huge part of that community. There's been a lot of advocacy to connect that to different services. It would be devastating to pull the equitable goods and services, the culturally specific services, the culturally responsible services apart from those communities. Sun schools, that's another example, right? Sun schools are supported by Multnomah County. So we could, for example, there look at Multnomah County and say, well, how does Multnomah County, what do those maps look like, right? But where are we looking at where Sun schools are located, right? And which districts are connected to which Sun schools. So I was really thinking about less of trying to use maps to create, access to communities that have been historically underserved, and be more thoughtful in considerations about how, considering that we're drawing brand new districts from scratch, we're thinking about setting everybody up for success, right? How are folks continuing to be connected to the food pantries that are connected to their Sun schools that are then connected to their parks? So I just wanted that to be something that was more explicit. And I appreciate Jenny Lee's comments about it, because I feel like part of it is when we're talking about the difference between criteria and data, criteria is a decision-making tool. Data are the components of what we consider in alignment with the criteria. So those are two different things. And so I put the question out there honestly to get, because I was really just I was thinking out loud last time, and I was really appreciating that we got to hear from every commissioner in terms of where folks were at. But for this particular meeting, it felt to me like it would be more rich if it wasn't just a question of, do we add more criteria or not? But to put something on the table that I was personally grappling with through our conversation last time, and to hear how people sat with that. So I just want to express appreciation for the feedback. I definitely have a lot to think about as we heard the public comment about it, but just did want to clarify that particular piece, because I do think that was does lead to confusion if you're not explicit about, we're not talking about turning back the hands of time and saying everybody has equitable access. We're talking about existing resources distribution and how those connect to existing communities. That is a little different than people and boundaries. So that's where I was trying to be more explicit. Thank you.
So we do have one individual actually who would like to testify. Since it's a public hearing, we'll let them testify, and then the floor is yours. Richard?
I've testified previously, but in response to this question of additional criteria, I think one of the issues is in the way in which the districts are going to be drawn. One has to take population as a major criteria, along with then compactness. It's actually relatively easy going into the database to draw 4 districts of equal population. I live in the Northwest District. If we simply take Northwest with downtown and with St. John's and some of the districts there, we come up with about 1/4 of the population of the city. And what you have to do is draw 4 districts, each which has about 1/4 of the population. Now, if you're concerned about other criteria, like connections of particular neighborhoods with particular schools, that's something that's much more a secondary or a tertiary analysis, which after the initial boundaries are drawn, you could then go in and say, well, I've heard from, and you'll get this from your discussions with the individual communities. Somebody will say, I don't want to be in that district, I want to be in the district next to it because of this criteria. And at that stage, you will be able to then determine whether there should be additional criteria which can influence but not override the major criteria of population and compactness. Those are the 2 things that you guys need to focus on. And the other criteria, although laudable, can be handled at a later stage in the process once you actually start drawing the district lines.
Thank you.
So, Sophia, I'm going to, if there aren't other folks waiting to speak, I'm reflect back on both Commissioner Van Ness's question and observation, and then Commissioner Manjarrez. I was supportive of asking the question, and I'm very glad we asked the question because I thought it was really, really good to have so many thoughtful reflections. It's great to know that we have other fellow citizens thinking along with us. I just wanted to say that my impression of what I heard was an appetite, a shared concern about equity, but no appetite to increase criteria. That's what I heard mainly from the hearing.
Would it be okay now if I can respond? Is that a right? This is Commissioner Van Ness. Does that work?
Yeah, we have no one else who's signed up, so we'll let you know.
Okay. So I want to make some comments or ask that we maybe have a dialogue about this. And I wrote some notes because I don't want to forget. I appreciate, to me, what we heard, and I totally appreciate and really appreciate all the testimony and the input from my fellow commissioners. But I don't think this, and I already forgot the term, the goods and services. I think we're conflating these two ideas, right? And I think that I don't want to speak for anybody, but after, getting to know these folks and learning how you all are doing so much for our community, we are all coming at this from a place of equity, and looking at it from all angles from a place of equity. But adding additional vague and ambiguous criteria that doesn't really say anything specific, doesn't really move the needle, and leaves people puzzled about what it is that we're saying, just opens the door for legal challenges, and a host of other things. And I think while the intention is good, I think it's actually not a good idea. I don't think we should add additional criteria. I think that the criteria we are required to consider automatically gives us the opportunity, and I know we will all be thoughtful, to evaluate and define these districts from a lens of equity. That we will, that in all of the things that our co-chairs today explained and reiterated to the community, that we are required to consider, every one of those criteria is going to be considered from the equity of from the lens of equity. I don't think this does anything to benefit that. I think if anything, it's going to be a likely reason for challenges down the road, and I don't think it moves the needle. So I don't know if, forgive me, I'm new to this commissioner thing. I don't know if I'm supposed to be more formal than that, but I'd love to hear your thoughts and tell me, where I'm not seeing things correctly and all of that.
I'm just gonna jump in because I had my hand up there. No, I thank you, Commissioner Van Ness and Commissioner Manjarrez and Commissioner Fleischman. Really appreciate the discussion. I'm so glad that we posed the question. I really appreciated the testimony, the discussion. All of the testimony was super thoughtful. I particularly appreciated getting the context around compactness. I thought that was extremely valuable for us to hear, as well as Jenny's comments relating to the Coalition of Communities of Color, and all of the testimony we heard tonight. I feel like we heard pretty loud and clear that folks are not wanting new criteria. However, I got the impression, and I personally feel that the consideration of goods and services, of public goods and services, does need to be considered as data. It does need to be considered, but more along the lines of a data set than additional criteria. I think we also heard that folks are wanting to see different scenarios, and that our ability to create multiple scenarios requires a degree of flexibility that adding new criteria would hamper. And I have looking at my notes here, but that's basically what I wanted to add in addition to what folks have already said. So really appreciate the testimony and the discussion. So thanks, everyone.
I think I'm next. I wanted to thank everybody who testified. It was really interesting for me to hear what everybody had to say and to hear the alignment that seemed to exist. As Commissioner Fleischman mentioned, I share his perspective that most of what we heard encouraged us not to add criteria. My understanding, though, is that we have public comment coming all the way to April 3rd at 8 a.m. And so we will have a lot more to hear and digest. And we will have a meeting on April 5th where, as commissioners, we'll be able to look at everything we heard tonight and everything that came in via whatever ways people send it in to us. And we'll be able to have a robust discussion at April 5th about what we heard and make a final decision about adding criteria on that at that meeting. Is that correct, Sophia?
Yes, that's correct. So we'll taking public comment through the 3rd, and it's at 8 a.m. so that staff, we have time to compile the comments and send them to you all. And we would deliberate on meeting on the April 5th.
Great. Thank you.
So we don't have any other folks who are signing up to testify. I see quite a few folks attending the meeting. So if you're just joining and you do want to testify, this is kind of like your last call. Raise your virtual Zoom hand or let us know through the Q&A. So co-chairs.
I'm sorry. I just want, there was a question or a comment that I wanted to respond to in the, I guess it was the Q&A. And I don't feel like I possess the expertise to respond to what Mr. Schwartz's comment was, but I want to respond to what Terry Harris's comment was, if I can read. I don't need to testify, but one very specific question as you evaluate the criteria testimony tonight might be simply how to handle the inequity, in all caps, felt in East Portland. Do you need to be careful that you inadvertently pack the lack of city services into a single district? If less wealthy East Portland could elect 4 commissioners, does compactness work against that? And I just want to respond to Mr. Harris, because I will tell you, just from a personal perspective, both the strongest feelings I have heard before I got appointed, while people have learned that I was on the commission, are from East Portland residents who, I have to say, as a lifelong Portlander, have been ignored and neglected for far too long. And despite the fact that I live in Southwest Portland, one of my priorities of when I was appointed to this is to make sure that whatever happens here, that does not continue. That does not continue. And I want Terry and anyone who's listening to know, and I'm sure you all agree that we're aware of that, of this inequity in the past, of this particular part of Portland. And it is 100% on my radar. And I'm sure that is the case with my fellow commissioners. And I just felt really that I really needed to make that point tonight.
I think I'll just jump in. Paul Limley, Commissioner. And one of the main reasons why I put my name in for this commission was because I live east of 205. And I wanted to make sure that we had really good representation for that part of the city, because I have the lived experience of not being, feeling like I'm not being represented by the city. So I just felt that the commenters know that the people who are represented here as commissioners, myself and a few others, do have that lived experience, and we will be taking that very strongly into consideration. I also want to compliment all of the presenters tonight. All the public comment was excellent and very informative, and I encourage more of it. And I look forward to hearing more from you later. Thank you.
Any last reflections before we close out our hearing? Seeing none, Adam, do you want to share the last two slides and our co-chairs can close us off?
So I want to, again, thank everyone who took time out of their day to be here with us today and for helping inform our districting process. The public comment period, as we've talked about on the district plan criteria, is going to end Monday, April 3rd at 8 a.m. And if you have additional comments you'd like to share, if you'd like to encourage your friends, your family, other community members to share comments, you can do that through that 8 a.m. at April 3rd. And you can submit comments in a variety of ways. You can do it through our online comment form, via email to districtcommission@portlandoregon.gov, by calling 311, or by sending email to the or by sending mail to the address that's up here on the screen. Next slide. The commission has a lot of work to do in a tight timeline, and we need everyone to stay engaged with the district commission process. There are many ways that you can engage with us. On the district commission's website, you can sign up to give verbal testimony, to submit written public comment, to join virtual meetings, to sign up to receive email updates, to request a briefing, to draw and submit district maps, and much more. And we'll be continuing to flesh that out as we move forward so that you have a better understanding of all the rich opportunities there's going to be for you to be able to contribute to our work. We'd also love to learn more about the best ways to engage with you and your communities. So if you have any advice for us, or groups that you would like us to make sure are included, or places where you think that we should come and take input, any of those things, we would just love to hear from you. And again, thank you so much for taking your time with us this evening. Thank you to all of the testifiers, and our hearing is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.